Biofuels can be all fine and great, but a lot of people in the oil industry will say biofuels can't scale, that it's nice to do it in a beaker or a flask or a pool somewhere, but they can't scale fast enough to make a dent in our voracious appetite for liquid transportation fuels. TJ, is that fair?
I understand the argument, and I think some of the technologies have that problem, but there are other approaches coming along that I think will do it. I work with a company called Solazyme here in South San Francisco, which is an algae-based oil company. And their process is actually not to have algae growing in ponds out in the environment, but to have them in big tanks. So it's like being in a brewery. Basically, you got fermentation tanks, and you can grow the algae there. And that can scale. You can manage the quality control and the cost and the scaling. They're providing fuel to the Navy right now for testing and certification for both jet fuel for planes and diesel fuel for the ships. And I think there are more and more companies coming out who have more innovative approaches.
It can be very water intensive, though.
Well, it's some of that can be recycled as well. I think there are a lot of innovations here that are going along, and it's kind of coupled in with our work on the genome and our ability to take what we're doing in that sector, the biology that we've advanced so much in the last 20 years, with our energy picture at the same time.
Make a refinery at the cellular level. Jim Sweeney, can biofuels scale?
Oh, I think they can scale, but for those that rely upon crops that are grown on either degraded land or land that you don't want to use otherwise for your food supply, there's only a limited amount of such land, and there's some maximum rates that you can have crops grow on that. So that sets an upper limit on what you can do from that type of biomass. Algae is quite different because you put it in a more industrial process. Algae I have lots of hope for, but there's a lot of things that we don't know, and particularly in how can you get it at a reasonable cost. And that will be yet to be seen. And I hope your investments in those companies turn out well.
TJ Glauthier?
Could I take a little different turn from what we're going to talk about and take a look at sort of 25-year increments? And I guess I'd like to acknowledge how much success we had in the 25-year period from 1975 to 2000, and that we need to challenge ourselves to do the same thing in the next 25 years. In fact, President Obama in his State of the Union put out some goals for 2035, 25 years from now, which I think could be done only if we really mobilize the country. Groups like yours. From 1975 forward, in that year, Gerald Ford was president. You were, I think, working at the White House at that time. And there was a Project Independence that was established, how we were going to become independent from oil. And it put forward a series of policies and projections. And what was interesting to me at the macro level was at that time we were using 75 quadrillion BTUs of energy for the whole country, of all forms of energy. And the projection was by the turn of the century, we'd be at 150 quads. So we would basically have increased 75 quads. The reality was that by the turn of the century, we actually increased slightly less than 25, 1/3 of the growth. And it was in every sector. The autos we've talked about with CAFE standards. Industry made huge changes because costs went up and they looked at their processes and realized they could save a lot of energy and cost. And the residential sector also, we started regulating refrigerators and a whole lot of appliances. We found that there were ways for us to make major changes and harness the engineering expertise of this country. We succeeded. What we need to do now, I think, is figure out how do we mobilize that same sort of ingenuity for our power plants, for our appliances and other devices that are using electricity or other forms of energy, for our transportation sector, and really make that same change. The projections out of the government right now, the Energy Information Administration, part of DOE that does its projections, in their latest forecast, their business as usual forecast, 25 years from now, we're still using more energy than today. Not very much, but it's still increasing. Mm-hmm. What can we do to change that paradigm and use the successes of the past?
Yeah, it's important to note that every president, starting with Nixon, has declared Its goals greatly reduced oil imports. President Nixon declared project independence. By 1985, we were going to be independent of oil, all foreign oil imports. It redefined two concepts. It redefined the concept of independent, and it redefined the concept of 1985. Other than that, and then Jimmy Carter declared that the energy area was the moral equivalent of war. Very unfortunate acronym, because acronym was MEOW. But that said, with every president trying to go ahead with this goal, we have made tremendous progress. But that stalled in the last 10, 15 years, and we got to uninstall it.